Steve Harvey was walking through the busy streets of Chicago, enjoying a rare moment of solitude. The sharp autumn air bit at his face, but the energy of the city kept him moving. As he passed a brick building, his attention was drawn to a man sitting on the sidewalk. The man's clothes were torn, his hair unkempt, and his face was lined with exhaustion. A small cardboard sign rested against his knees, "Hungry. Need $1 for bread." Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. By the way, what city are you watching us from? Write it in the comments, we're curious. Steve slowed down, his gaze fixed on the man. Something about him stood out, not just the sign, but the emptiness in his eyes. People passed by, not sparing the man a second glance, but Steve couldn't do the same. He approached the man, crouching slightly to meet his level. This wasn't the kind of moment Steve could ignore. The man needed more than $1, and Steve intended to find out why. When Steve asked why the man only needed $1, the man hesitated before speaking. He introduced himself as Walter Brown, a Vietnam War veteran. His voice was calm but carried the weight of years of hardship. Walter explained that after returning from the war, life hadn't been kind. His family was drowning in debt, and despite his best efforts, the bills kept piling up. His wife fell ill and passed away not long after. With no other choice, Walter sold their home to pay off the debts. His children, now grown, had moved away to start their own lives, leaving him alone. As time passed, things only got worse. Walter couldn't find work, employers would take one look at his ragged appearance and dismiss him without a second thought. With no home and no steady income, Walter had been living on the streets, relying on the kindness of strangers for scraps of food. Asking for $1 wasn't about getting rich, it was about surviving one more day. Steve listened in silence, his expression growing heavier with each word. Walter wasn't just a homeless man, he was a reminder of how easily society could abandon those who had once served it. Steve couldn't walk away after hearing Walter's story. He told the man to follow him, and together they headed to a nearby restaurant. Walter hesitated at the door, his tattered clothing and unwashed appearance making him feel out of place. But Steve's presence gave him courage. Inside, the staff's reaction was immediate. The hostess frowned, glancing at Walter with clear discomfort. A manager approached, whispering that they couldn't serve someone like him, because it might disturb the other guests. Steve's demeanor shifted. Calm but firm, he reminded the staff they had no right to judge a person by their appearance. If they refused to serve them, Steve said he wouldn't hesitate to share this moment on his show, exposing their actions to millions of viewers. The threat worked. The restaurant agreed to seat them, but only in a private VIP area, away from the main dining space. Steve accepted, knowing this was more about Walter's dignity than making a scene. For the first time in weeks, Walter sat at a proper table with warm food in front of him. Steve let him eat in peace, but the significance of the moment wasn't lost on either of them. As Walter finished his meal, Steve handed him a cell phone, telling him to keep it close. "Expect a call," Steve said as they left. Walter didn't know what to expect, but for the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of hope. The next day, Steve Harvey stepped onto the set of his talk show with a purpose. During the broadcast, he recounted his encounter with Walter. He spoke about the struggles Walter had faced as a veteran and how society had failed him. Steve called on his audience and the broader community to take action. He explained that Walter wasn't just one man in need, he represented countless others who had been overlooked and forgotten. His words struck a chord with viewers, and the response was immediate. Within hours, emails and calls flooded the studio. People wanted to help. Among them was a construction company owner who offered Walter a job and a room in their company's dormitory. The position didn't require prior experience, just a willingness to work, something Walter had never lost. Steve wasted no time. That evening, he called Walter, who answered with a mixture of surprise and nervousness. Steve shared the incredible news: Walter now had a job, a place to live, and a fresh start. On the other end of the line, Walter was speechless, his gratitude pouring through in broken words and tears. This wasn't just a solution, it was the beginning of a new chapter for Walter. Steve knew this wasn't the end of the story, but it was a turning point. 6 months later, Walter Brown stepped onto the stage of Steve Harvey's talk show. The audience erupted into applause as the once homeless man, now clean-shaven and wearing a neatly pressed suit, took his seat across from Steve. Walter's transformation was nothing short of remarkable. With steady work at the construction company and a roof over his head, he had begun to rebuild his life. He spoke about the challenges he faced during his first weeks on the job, the physical toll, the self-doubt, but also about the support he received from his new co-workers. For the first time in years, Walter felt like he belonged somewhere. He was saving money, reconnecting with his children, and even volunteering at a local shelter to help others who were struggling. As Walter shared his journey, the room was silent, every viewer captivated. He turned to Steve, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Walter thanked him not just for the meal or the job opportunity, but for something far greater, restoring his sense of dignity and hope. Steve, visibly moved, reminded the audience that this wasn't about heroics, it was about doing the right thing. He urged everyone to look beyond appearances and show kindness whenever they could. The show ended with a standing ovation, but the impact of Walter's story lingered far beyond that day. It was a powerful reminder that even a small act of compassion could ripple into life-changing results. For Walter, it wasn't just a new beginning, it was a second chance to live with purpose. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video to show your support.